Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to Dope and Dharma. I am Dharma, and this is Dope Doctor. What's up, brother?
What's up, man? How are you doing?
I am doing well, and for those of you who don't watch us on a consistent basis, this is actually Dharma Time. This is our Dharma Time hour. You know, collectively we are Dope and Dharma, and we change it up with different shows on different days. Tuesdays has been reserved for Dharma Time. Some of you watched us last night on a local radio station, WOKB, is it 1680, I think? I can't remember at the moment.
1680.
Yeah. I'm a little out of practice here.
There you go, man.
Yeah. Speaking
New year,
of,
man.
It is New Year. This is the first Dharma Time of the new year, man. And our first show, if you will, was Friday of last week. It was kind of a, just more or less a reintroduction to everybody. And then, like I said, last night we did the Couch Live on the local station, and right now we're doing Dharma Time. And hey, Margie, how you doing? Hey, Marissa, thanks guys for tuning in.
Hey.
For those of you who are listening to this later on in a podcast or watching it on YouTube, if you'd like to join us live, like Margie and Marissa over here, you can go to facebook.com/WPSN99. And then it'll take you straight to the Facebook page, which you can watch us live, and you can interact and comment, things of that nature. And apparently, for some reason, because our name is Dope and Dharma, when you search out Dope and Dharma, it gives you like a warning about our show that you might not want to listen to us or whatever. Because I think it's because of the dope part. Because
It's because of me, man. It's always
you're the bad apple, man.
Doesn't like anything about me.
Yeah, you're the bad apple. So, anyways, I digress.
Hey, by the way, how come your microphone doesn't sound as crisp as it did?
Well, it could sound crisp if I come closer.
No, it doesn't have that same.
I don't know.
Did you turn it down or something?
No, I didn't turn it down. But anyways, huh?
Maybe it's on my end.
Could be your ears, man. You're getting older, That's what happens. Speaking of that, before we get started into the show,
my smell and my
yeah. So before we get started on the topic, which if you haven't been able to read it, today's topic is going to be connection. But before we get into that, yes, we've been off air. Obviously, he had the surgery, which we discussed on our previous episode. I think it was either at the end of the year or beginning of the year. And then I call him up and say, I'm ready to call him up and say, hey, man, let's start the new year. Hit the ground running. Let's get started. Let's just make a run at this. And he doesn't answer, which isn't unusual. But then I get an email or a message back immediately. His standard one is, I'm in a meeting, I'll call you back, which is usually code for I'm on the toilet. But this time it wasn't the standard one. It was, I'm sick, I can't talk. And I was like, what do you mean you're sick? His whole house got COVID. So this dude had the worst ending of 2021 that many people could probably have without deaths and things of that nature. But so he had the surgery, all that long recovery, and then he caught COVID. So, 2022 is definitely a new year for you, and you're looking forward, hopefully, to a better start than the ending of last year. So.
I am.
That was crazy.
Yeah, I'm so ready for a better year, man. That fourth quarter was horrible.
Yeah. Well, I was notified last night that my wife was in very close proximity to somebody with COVID, so we're all kind of crossing our fingers and hoping that nothing comes from that. So we'll see. Apparently, this Omicron is ridiculously easy to catch, so who knows? Anyways, this isn't a COVID show, so let's get started with what we were talking about. So what I wanted to talk about, and I figured the first show of the year for us would be a great way to kind of kick it off, and that is connection. Right? Connection. And I think different people define it differently, if you will. But the one thing that I have come to realize over the last, I'd say, couple years of my life, I think I underestimated connection. Right? I underestimated the importance or the value of connection. I think that's, I don't know, when I heard connection, I thought just kind of being in the same room with somebody, knowing who they are, knowing about them, oh yeah, we're connected, And I thought that's all it was, and I thought that was kind of where it started and stopped, right? That was the importance of it. But as I've gotten older, as I've done more, internal growth and just kind of seen some of the things that have been happening around the world lately, I kind of came to that realization of, wow, connection really is important. Like, at the end of the day, that's what we're all looking for. Whether we know it or not, that's what we're all looking for. All these little things that we do, all these frustrations that we have, all these decisions that we make, at the end of the day, it's kind of revolving around trying to find our own form of connection somehow, some way. We might not know that. We might not call it that. We might not be aware of that. But that's what it is. That's what's driving everything that we're doing is a connection. And so, which is odd to me because anytime you look in the media now and you see all these news stories or articles, we have more tools to be connected than ever before in human history, and yet we're the least connected we've ever been. And I think that's weird, and that's why I want to talk about it today, is because I think we have so many tools to be connected, and yet why? Why are we not connected, and why is connection such a so far removed from most people's thought process? So, what are your immediate thoughts before we get going?
My immediate thoughts is, defining connection.
That's actually what I was going to ask you to do.
Oh, well, I'm just trying to think, from my perspective. Connection can be physical and it can be emotional, right?
Right.
I think there are deeper rooted emotional connections, and then there's more superficial physical connections.
Yeah.
You know how when people talk about love languages?
Yeah, the 5 love languages.
Right. So I'm not a big horoscope kind of person, but as a Libra, apparently, I match it pretty good a lot of times, and so
right.
I don't know much about it in regards to connection, but I like both. I like a good mixture of emotional and physical.
Yeah.
Not one over the other. I mean, I can't say that I like one over the other, but I think that both types of connection are important, and I think sometimes people focus too much on one type over the other type, and then
I'd agree with that.
Therefore, you're off balance. Or if the persons that you're around require maybe one over the other, and you're not providing that could cause a problem as well. But I know, at least for me, I think that I have uncovered that a lot of my connectivity issues that I experienced without really understanding it or knowing it stemmed from early childhood. And I say that because I am a preemie. I am a baby that was in an incubator for a few weeks, so I didn't get any connection.
You didn't get that oxytocin release at birth?
No, I didn't get a parent holding me as an infant. Those early days, because we both have kids, right?
Yep.
So I'm assuming that when your children were first born, I mean, how soon was it before you held them, or the mother of the children?
Well, I actually have pictures of me holding them, and feeding them, as they were born in the hospital, within an hour. Yeah.
Right, and I actually delivered both my kids, so I was the first hands that touched my kids,
right.
and pulled them out. Not pulled them out, but just caught them, yanked them right out of there.
Get out of here!
Yeah, man, I was like, it's time. But I wasn't that way. I went straight into an incubator and I stayed there for weeks. So that connection, I think,
right.
wasn't there, and therefore there was always something a little bit missing. And I don't know if I can 100% attribute it to that, but
it played a role, I'm sure.
Psychology, which is what I did study, it tends to lean towards that, and
right.
and it made sense, and it made perfect sense of why I was always kind of searching for connection.
Right. Yeah, I think I agree with everything you said, and I do believe that there is two main kind of focal points when it comes to connection that most people think of, and like you said, that's physical and then that's emotional, right? I think physical connection is typically however you feel, loved or comforted physically. So for some people that's cuddling, for some people that's sex, for some people that's kissing, for some people that's just being present in the same room. I mean, I think everybody has their own kind of way and how they interpret that. And I think for the most part, many people have a decent handle on that for the most part. Like I said, if one person's idea of physical connection is actual, cuddling or touching or caressing, and the other person thinks that, I was in the same room as you, well, then there might be some conflict there, and that's where they need to work it out, right? That's where the difference of perspective comes in. Right. The other one I think that I know I struggled the most with was the emotional connection, right? The psychological connection with people. I struggle with that one. I still struggle with that one. That one's the hardest one for me to consistently, skillfully handle and maintain in my life. Because every time I think I've got a handle on it, I realize I subconsciously start to kind of pull back, right? And the main thing is vulnerability and empathy, right? Vulnerability and empathy are not things that I was very good at. Those are skills that early on I learned to repress. Early on I learned those skills were not useful in the environment that I was in, and so I learned how to kind of push them down and not utilize them, which is fantastic for survival, guys. Oh, it's amazing for survival. It really is. However, creating connected relationships, not so good. It's actually quite the opposite. And so, the empathy and the vulnerability are the things that I've had to learn how to make a focal point, right? And the reason why they are important is, as I said, connectivity is really what we're looking for. And what I noticed was, like, for instance, my own lack of vulnerability. And I think a lot of people can relate to this because we live in a society where vulnerability is not really, it's not pushed out there as a positive thing, right? A lot of people hear that word vulnerable. Ooh, I don't want that, And so I think that vulnerability is something that needs to be pushed, and I just wasn't that good at it. The idea of allowing somebody in, or not projecting this specific image or what people think you should be living up to, things of that nature. I think we all struggle with that to an extent. I think some people are better at it than others, but I think that many people really, really struggle with vulnerability.
I don't even like the word vulnerability.
Exactly. I didn't either. I still don't.
Yeah, it feels like you're going to set yourself up for pain.
Yeah.
That's what I hear.
You're setting yourself up for the option of pain,
Right.
And that's the scary part. Is why the hell would I want to do that? Why the hell would I want to give another human being the ability to hurt me? Like, that doesn't make sense. It sounds counterintuitive, right? But what I noticed was, even with my own kids, right? I'll never forget it. There was a moment where I was doing my own work on vulnerability, and it was actually recent. I filtered everything through, like, frustration, or like angry, right? That's how I showed all my emotions. So to the untrained eye, to somebody who doesn't understand the complexity of emotions, all they saw was, damn, he's pissed off, or wow, he's frustrated, and he's angry. No, I was hurt, or I was, fearful, or I was whatever, and it was coming out as frustration, because that's all I knew how to do. And so I'll never forget it. My daughter, I think she was still 16 or 17 at the time. I don't remember. She did something. I don't remember what it was. It was in the big scheme of things, it was relatively insignificant, but it had something to do with, like, following directions or doing something I asked her to do, or something along those lines. And I'll never forget this conversation, though. The look on her face. Normally, I would like reprimand, or I would correct, or I would teach. I would say something along the lines of, hey, you got to do this, this, and this, because you got to learn responsibility, whatever it is. A dad phrase, basically. But one day, as I was doing some of this work, I looked at it, I was like, it really hurt my feelings when you did that. She stopped immediately, like, whatever she was doing, she stopped immediately and looked at me like I just said some sort of an alien phrase. And she had like a reboot kind of thing. She did not know what to say, did not know what to do. I had her 100% complete and undivided attention when I said those words, because I've never said them before, ever, to them. And so she turned and looked at me like, what? And I was like, yeah, it hurt my feelings, because I thought we had a different kind of relationship. And when I ask you to do something, you don't do it. It makes me feel like what I say to you doesn't matter. I finished the conversation, essentially. And what that did, though, was it made me vulnerable, and it created a different connection. Her listening ears were different than when I was saying, hey, you need to do this kind of a thing, which I think there is a time and a place, obviously, for the dad to come out and do those things. Of course, I don't think that should go away. But if you're trying to have an actual connection, then you have to be vulnerable. And I had to say those words. It hurt my feelings. And let me tell you, those are the hardest words I've ever had to say in my entire life. I've gotten better at them over the years, but even to this day, it's still it makes me cringe just a little bit when I say the words "you hurt my feelings," because I was always raised to believe, and I lived in an environment that you just don't say that as a dude. You don't say that, and so what I've had to learn over the years, and what I think everybody else should learn as well, is that vulnerability is a huge stepping stone to creating connectivity, because in that moment to my daughter, I went from this asshole who's telling her things that she doesn't want to tell her or doesn't want to hear to a human. I in that moment, it was like, wait a minute, I have the ability to hurt him? Like, whoa, like it was a completely foreign idea to her. And that from that day forward, it changed the complexity of our relationship. I'm not saying it made it better or worse. It just changed. It was like a completely different pivot from what we had before. And I feel more connected to her. It doesn't mean she listens to me anymore than she did. She's still 17. But there's a different connection than there ever has been, right? And I've noticed that I used to do that indirectly with some of my guy friends, right? Some of my male friends that I've known for a very long time that I have a mutual respect for, like you and I. You and I have had many conversations in the last several years of just say, hey, man, I appreciate you, or things of that nature that aren't typically thought of as the way men communicate with one another. And I think that contributes to the friendship and to the bond that we have, because I do feel connected to a lot of the people around me. And I think that part of that is the vulnerability, man. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree with you. I think that leads to a much deeper connection and much deeper friendship than others, because we all have that, like, I don't care and I don't want to care, like button, right? And so you tend to not, depending on how much trauma you've experienced or how much pain you've experienced from relationships or past connections, you go into it wanting to care less in the next relationship, because what you're really trying to do is guard yourself from pain.
If I don't care, you can't hurt me.
Right, and that's one of the examples that we walk around with, and saying, all right, well, if I don't become vulnerable to you, or if I don't give you too much of my heart or my soul, well, then you can't hurt me as much, which is somewhat true, but not necessarily, because unfortunately, you're not really in control of how much you actually care about someone hurting you. If you're a caring person and you're an empathetic person and you tend to feel a lot, you're going to do that regardless of what you think. So
you're lying to yourself.
Relationship and not give much and not produce much and try not to connect much, but it's not going to stop you from feeling some of the pain that's going to come your way. What it is going to do, though, is maybe prevent that other person from feeling warm enough and comfortable enough to connect back with you, which then is going to limit the benefit you're going to get from the relationship. So you're going to get all the negative from the relationship because you're still vulnerable. You really are still very sensitive, but you're not going to reap the benefit of allowing someone in and getting that warmth that they give you. So unfortunately, when you have resentments and you have pain and trauma from early years, and you don't process through those and learn how to be a little bit more self-soothing and a little bit more focused on the good that comes your way rather than the negative that comes your way, then you just carry it on to the next relationship, and then it just proves your point. You carry it on to the next relationship, and it proves your point. Next thing you know, you're 20, 30, 40 years down the road, and you go, see, I've been right all along. And you see it a lot. You know what I think is a very good teaching thing for us is reality TV. I think reality TV is, by the way, these dogs make a lot of noises, right? You hear everything they.
Oh, I haven't heard them. No, I hear my own dog over. Yeah, we put wood floors in my daughter's room, and so I'm hearing his nails scrape every 2 seconds.
Yeah, mine too. I hear that on the floor because he's dreaming and he's like, running, and it's like, bro,
he's dreaming a connection.
Real life. Don't be running in your dreams. Anyway, so what was I saying right before that? I got distracted. I distracted
Squirrel. Yeah,
Squirrel.
And you distracted me.
Well, but instead of going right into that, can you?
I'm gonna read some of these comments.
Comments on Facebook Live.
Let me see. Marissa said, "You sound a little worse today. How are you feeling?"
Me? Yeah. I'm all clogged up.
That's what it sounds like. Marissa says she was in an incubator for a bit too, and rushed to surgery. Margie said she was the same as you. She was adopted and didn't have connection at birth. She said, that's me to a T. I feel that need every day. And then Marissa said, I'm discovering over the last several years that growing up, having to be so strong and overcome the obstacles of a disability made it harder for me to identify, accept, and process the lower vibrational emotions that vulnerability, sadness, fear, etc. And then Margie said, yes, I love too much, I feel, but in the back of my mind, I always feel now that hurt comes next, but I take the chances, LOL. I'm very vulnerable, and my friends tell me to start speaking on how I truly feel. Makes sense. I'm still learning that. And then Richard A., what's up, man? He said, oh, hey, guys, I'm glad to see you. I was starting to think you had fallen victim to the common cold. So, yeah, I know. Glad to see you too, Richard. But yeah, I think I think vulnerability can't be overstated, man. I think that I really do believe that that's the itch that we're all trying to scratch, and we're not aware of it. Like you said, go ahead.
Well, I mean, the self-soothing part is, I think, the part that's very important to learn, right? Self-love, self-soothing, self-awareness, the self stuff.
Yeah.
I think we spend a lot of time focused on how others are treating us, how others are speaking to us. Like when I hear someone say, "You got to give respect to get respect,"
yeah.
Or you treat me this, I treat people the way they treat me.
Well, they made me do this,
like that. It's like, well, then you're allowing the whole world to control you.
Yes.
Right. So, like, if you're rude to me, Trinity, therefore I'm rude to you, then I allowed you to control that relationship. If I'm only nice to you if you're nice to me, if I only respect you if you respect me, if I only do things based on a response to you, well, then nobody's really taking responsibility, or at least I'm not taking responsibility, and then therefore I can walk around and just blame the whole world for my life feeling the way it feels, when in reality it's you just be the best you regardless of the other person, and then you're in control. Like, you shouldn't be able to make me upset. You shouldn't be able to make me feel unworthy. You shouldn't be able to make me feel disrespectful or behave disrespectfully. I should be able to stay behaving respectfully regardless of who you are and how you are. That is a gift I give you. I give you trust. I give you respect. I give you attention. I give you affection. I give you kindness. I give you attention. I give you all these things, but that's because that's who I am.
Right.
And I think that is one thing that I had to learn, because I was always a counterpuncher.
Sure.
And unfortunately, I became just a really good counterpuncher. Unfortunately, I viewed everything as a threat and viewed everything as a punch forward. So I viewed hey, have a nice day, as a don't tell me what to do. So I viewed that as a negative. Like, what are you trying to say? That I'm not having a good day? Are you trying to control me? You know what I mean? And so I would just always be punching. And my excuse in my head, or to anybody else of authority that would get upset with me, was, well, that person did this, so it was justified.
Right.
So I would justify everything, every emotion, every thought, every behavior, never taking responsibility. And when you go years doing that, pretty soon it's so habitual, it's so part of who you are, that you just might tell yourself, that's just the way I am. And isn't that such a sad thing when you hear somebody say, that's just the way I am, and like, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's
what you learned
today, or how you are today, but are you okay with that? Are you okay with what comes from that? And if you are, great. But if you don't like a lot of the circumstances around you, that may be one of the contributing factors of why the circumstances around you are the way they are.
Yeah, well, I think you kind of touched on something there as well in the middle of it, and that was, this idea that everybody's doing whatever they're doing, like, to us, right? Like, if you're having a bad day, or you're aggressive, or you're loud, or whatever it may be, you're doing that to me. No, that's really not usually the case. What typically happens is that person's going through whatever it may be unskillfully. Maybe they're having a bad day, a bad moment. Maybe they just got bad news. Maybe they're just, they're hurt and they have never healed from that hurt. And so they're lashing out to anybody who's in front of them, and you just so happen to be in front of them at that moment. Has nothing to do with you. Because really what you're saying when you're saying they're doing that to me is, this person's awesome and great to everybody else on the planet, and doesn't really do things unskillfully. It's just me. And it doesn't sound very likely, does it? No, it's not likely that their whole life is full of butterflies and unicorn kisses, except for when it comes to you.
Right.
What's more likely is this person, hurt people. What's more likely is this person's dealing with some stuff. They haven't gotten closure on things, and they misinterpreted your whatever it was as aggression or as some sort of infliction of pain, and they're responding to what they just thought. And then, like he said, when you react to that with your own aggression and your own insecurities, your own hurts, your own pains, all that does is piss you off and confirm to them that they were right. It was all about them in the first place. And then it just starts to feed off of each other. And next thing you know, you guys walk away from a situation thinking, yeah, what an asshole. No, not really. It was just two people who really want to be connected, who wouldn't get out of their way long enough to be connected to another human. They had all these barriers and all these walls that they thought was armor, and all that armor really did was just keep everybody away from you. And not in a good way, because you don't want everybody away from you. As much as you think that you do, you don't. And I think that right there is a hard thing to wrap your head around for a lot of people. I know for me it was. I prided myself for so long for being the big ogre in the room who didn't care, you know what I mean? I didn't need anybody or whatever. And for the most part, I functioned that way. It's not like I wasn't able to get through my day. I was still successful. I still achieved things, but I didn't have that fulfillment that I was looking for. I didn't have that inner peace that I was truly looking for until I dropped that facade and just became who I was, And do I have moments where I'm aggressive or whatever? Absolutely. But I also have moments where I'm vulnerable and I'm sad or I'm whatever. And I've learned to, in my life, as I've gotten older, to not push those things away, to just allow myself to feel those things and realize it's okay, And Richard literally just commented, says, man is not meant to be alone. You're 100% right. We're not. We're social animals, and none of us are islands, even though we think that we are. Or we try to exude this idea that we are. You're not. And the more you try to do that, the more you're making your own life unlivable. And that's not what you're not realizing is your behavior is contributing to your unlivableness. If I don't even know if that's a word, but it is now. Yeah, you're contributing to that. I watch it all the time, even with my kids. Like, it's so evident. I watch it with my children, like my younger ones, because they haven't learned how to deceive the way we have. Right, as we've gotten older, we're much better at deceiving ourselves. And so with my 10-year-old. I'll see something happen, and I'll see him immediately get really angry at his sister or whatever it is. And for me, it's like a huge flashing sign. He got his feelings hurt. You know what I mean? Like, he was embarrassed or he got his feelings hurt or whatever it may be. But all he sees is aggression, and she did this, so I'm mad at her. It's like, that's not what happened. You got your feelings hurt, and then you lashed out because it sucked. What you should have done is just explain to her they hurt your feelings. And so we've learned that from an early age. And that would be our lizard brain, right? Is just this fight or flight kind of idea. So we learn how to defend ourselves. It's like an instinct. We don't even have to think. It just comes. But as we get older, we're supposed to, in theory, learn that, hey, that's not really benefiting me. Let me not do that anymore. The problem is, oftentimes we surround ourselves with a bunch of other people who are also thinking with their lizard brains, and we feel justified, and we'll go and tell people, well, I did this, and they're like, yeah, I agree, because they're responding out of their lizard brain, and they're just continually, letting you know that you're right, so you feel justified, and that's part of the reason why I think we should, expand our horizons and get, some friends that are both further along the path than we are and not as far along the path, so they can both teach us, because I was guilty of that, and we still are, right? I mean, how many times, like you've always said, and I agree with you 100%, how many of us couldn't go into any social gathering and start complaining about our spouse and not have everybody in the room immediately, yeah, me too. Of course, and you'll feel justified. You'll walk out there feeling like, yeah, my spouse is the worst ever. Not really. You just had a bunch of yes people around you who all just chimed in. And so I think that's part of the, as you said earlier, the self-awareness is it's important when something happens to start to acknowledge the feeling tone of what just took place, right? When I say feeling tone, inherently our brains are going to deem something that happens to us as positive, negative, or neutral, right? I like it, I didn't like it, or I didn't really care. And we don't really have much of a say-so in that matter. It's just an instinctual, it's going to happen. Your brain's going to, whatever it is going to happen, and you're going to say, I like that, I didn't like it, or I didn't care. And that's okay, but start acknowledging that. Like, that's your homework, right? Like, going throughout your day, even little things, it doesn't matter what it is. The tiniest things have a feeling tone, but we're so used to doing it instinctually that we don't think about it. And then we respond to whatever we deemed it as. If we deemed it as a negative thing, or if we deemed it as something we don't like, we're going to inherently respond to that with aggression and pushing it back and whatever, not even knowing it. So what I encourage everybody to do is throughout your day, ask yourself, it sounds cheesy, I know, but ask yourself, what was the feeling tone of that? Did I like that? Did I not like that? Like, what am I responding to? And what I think, by bringing attention to that, you'll start to see, like, wow, I'm not as in control as I thought that I was. I reacted a lot more than I ever thought that I did. And what was I reacting to? Well, you're reacting to the feeling tone of whatever it was that just happened. Your brain said, oop, I don't like that, push it away. And then the only way we know how to push it away is aggressive, mean, angry, whatever it is, attack. And so I think that if you start kind of paying attention to the feeling tone and looking at your responses to things, you might start to, it might surprise you, is all I'm saying. And what you might not realize is some of those reactions are contributing to your lack of connectivity with another person. Because it's very hard to connect. Like, go try to hug a cactus. It's probably not going to be very fun. You know what I mean? And so if you're constantly sending out these vibes, nobody wants to come close to that. Like, even in my own home, when I would react to things being frustrated and stuff, instead of saying that hurt my feelings, it was very hard for them to connect to me as anything other than this dad figure that was, holding them accountable. Which, yeah, there's room for that. And if that's all I want my relationship to be, then I should have kept doing that. But I didn't want my relationship to be just that. Because my little kids are going to grow up to be adults one day. And I want to have that relationship with them. So as much as I need them to grow, I also need to continue to evolve and grow as well. And so part of that evolution, part of that growth is learning how to connect with them on a different level. Got one more. We got a comment here before you respond. Let's see. Margie said, yes, try not to read into things because it causes chaos. Got to communicate and be honest, and real friends will understand. Richard said that goes all the back to the garden you don't believe in. And then Marissa said, I had a conversation with somebody who was angry once, who I was able to get to a point where they got emotional and said they just want people around them and felt like no one wanted that with her. Maybe it was the wrong thing to say at the time, but I reminded her that she's going to push people away by how she was acting, myself included. So I've been flapping my gums for a little while, man. What's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's, I'm thinking about the counterpunching that you alluded to again.
Sure.
The responding, the reacting, right?
Yep.
And I think that when you know how you instinctually interact with people better, you can assess whether that's okay for you or if you want to try to make some changes to that. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I think changing, some things that apparently are innate or they feel very innate are very difficult to change.
Yeah.
Some of your instincts will take a very long time to change. But the proof that even instincts can be altered is the proof that we have individuals that have learned certain skill sets that you have to do without thinking. For instance, we're in football season. We're in the height of football season right now. Right?
Yes, sir.
We're in the playoffs. And what you see is very talented individuals that have practiced so much so that when they are at that line and the ball is now in play, they have to instinctually respond rather than think it through. Because if they start thinking, that's when they make errors. That's when they, look to see where they're going to run before they catch the ball. That's where they go through their progressions as a quarterback and throw an interception. But when they're instinctually behaving, trusting in the talents that they've been given, trusting in the tools that they've been given, and they have full confidence in those instincts, I'm not saying they're not going to make some errors, but a lot of times they're going to make some incredible plays based on those instincts. They're going to juke when they need to. They're going to go left and right when they need to. They're going to go through those progressions and instinctually see that there's a guy over here open, and that's where I'm going to throw it. And when you watch that stuff, you're like, well, those things translate into life. We are those professional athletes every day, only we're not getting paid like they're getting paid, and we're not feeling the accolades of a championship or anything out there, or a victory of a game. But every day you're going through progressions. You're going through that same level of you're responding in a moment instinctually that you've trained for. So if you've always trained yourself to feel negative, or you trained yourself that you're a victim, that victim mentality carries on into not just one aspect of your life. It starts going into all aspects of your life. It's impossible to contain negative energy. It's going to move. But why? Because energy moves. Yep. Science is science, right? 1 + 1 is 2. And so energy has to move. So if you are flowing with a lot of positive energy, you're not going to be able to contain the positive energy from getting passed on to another. They're going to feel it, and they want to be around you. They want to listen to you. They want close proximity. They want to be your friend, all that stuff. But when you're transmitting a lot of negative energy because it's just overflowing, I don't care what kind of words you think are coming out of your mouth. I don't care what kind of thing you think you're projecting. We feel your negative energy, and guess what? I am the kind of person that I instinctually repel from that. It's like if it's like the magnets. You know how you get the magnets that and you put them one side and they connect, and you flip it, and no matter what they won't come to. That's how I feel towards toxic people. Like if you're negative all the time and toxic, I just instinctually just I go a different direction. It's just I can't really be there. And I mean that. And the kind of toxicity I'm talking about, just so we're clear, is a person that doesn't take responsibility for anything. That's what I call a toxic person. Yeah. I don't call a toxic person if you're having a bad day and you just want to share your negative energy. What I call a toxic person is a person that never ever takes responsibility for anything that happens to them. They're constantly blaming others. They're constantly focused on the outside world as the problem, and they view their opinions and their responses to the world as righteous. Like that's the way to be. That is a very difficult person for me to be around. Now, I can deal with those people on short spurts and short little things, but for long-term or deeper connections, no. Because a person that's complaining about someone else all the time and you're always their confidant is the same person that when they're with that other person, you are now that person they're talking about.
They're complaining about you.
It's a real quick... people switch teams really fast, man. You know what I mean? It's like, we're all like that. I'm no different. I can switch teams really quick based on certain circumstances, and it's whatever I deem to be a circumstance worthy of me disconnecting my loyalty to you. That's a human response, right? Like you cheat on me, I'm pretty sure I'm going to cut that loyalty string on pretty quick. Right. But I think people do that to the word disrespect a lot, and I think that that if you are a person that is constantly seeing the disrespect that's coming your way, I can assure you probably struggle with respecting other people in a way that they want to be respected as well. I'm pretty sure that your perspective on respect is tilted way in your favor, and you're probably disrespecting other people a lot and don't even catch it. And the other thing is that you're walking around with wounds that someone else gave you. For instance, in those early years when I would feel disrespected by authority figures, whatever my insecurity was, I thought that was the reason I was being disrespected. So if it was because I dressed a certain way, that was the reason. If it was because I was a certain culture or race of a person, then that was the issue. If it was because I had facial hair a certain way, or I had my hair a certain way, then that was the issue. In other words, whatever I would judge you on, that is what I thought you were judging me on. Right. So if I was judging you, Trinity, for your whiteness, I thought you were judging me for my brownness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
If I was judging you because you were female, then you're judging me like that because I'm male. It was those kinds of things that I had to mature from. And I think that we're a much better society when we realize that if I'm pointing the finger at you about a certain specific thing, then I'm probably real biased in that same specific thing. And I can't blame you for that. I have to look internally, and I have to change me for that.
Yeah, well, you touched on something earlier on, and you just reminded me again when you said bias, because I actually wrote it down, but I didn't want to interrupt. you talked about how hard it is to change those instincts. So one of the things that I think can make it even harder, and I think that I know I've dealt with it before, and I'm sure many of you have as well, is like our instincts can lie to us. And what I mean by that is, so something happens, and I convince myself that I like it, right? I convince myself that that's what I want. In other words, it's like the frog in boiling water who convinces itself that that's its home, it's where it's comfortable, right? Like, we can't confuse adaptability with comfort and with what we actually want. In other words, we as humans can adapt to damn near anything. There's people out there who live in prisons, in solitary confinement. There's many things that people can adapt to. There's people who go to war and who are at war for months at a time, and just that's their new normal, and they've adapted. There's people in this world who've adapted to things that you can never imagine that's just normal life for them, right? And so we can't confuse with things that we've adapted to, we've become accustomed to, with things that we like, right? Just because you're comfortable with it doesn't mean you actually like it. And so, for instance, for myself, there is a huge part of me still that is totally okay with being an asshole. Like, there's a part of me that loves it, right? Like, some of our, him and I have conversations sometimes texting that we would probably never say to the public out there because it's still kind of in us, right? We don't truly feel that way, but you never get rid of that completely, right? It's still a part of me. It's just not who I choose to be anymore. Doesn't mean it goes away. I've learned in my life that that's not who I want to be. That's not who I want to put out there to the world. Thankfully, him and I have a relationship where we can kind of, say those things to one another. We both understand that it stops there and it's nothing to be read into. But there was a time.
Gruden thought the same thing.
Yeah, right. You don't say anything anywhere remotely close to what he was talking about.
Kidding.
But no, my point is this idea of being like, keeping it real, or I tell the truth, and you're just being an asshole to people, and the idea of changing that, you're like, well, I don't want to change that. And so if you don't want to change that, and we're telling you that you probably should to help with connectivity, there's going to be a part of you that says, well, then I don't want that, and if your mindset is of that, then you're right. It's going to be even harder to change. And that's where I encourage people to take a real honest look at things. Not a biased look. And we covered this, I don't know, a couple months ago when we had Dominique on, and we were talking about weed, marijuana. And the thing that I've noticed, especially going into the drug and alcohol world, but it actually fits in every aspect of life, not just that particular genre. We convince ourselves that we're living by a certain value system when oftentimes we're going against it in the decisions that we make because we'll justify it. Right? So using weed as an example, just because we already did a show on it, somebody would say to me, well, I don't like lying. Lying is, lying's a bad thing. Lying, I'm not a liar, and, I don't like people lie to me, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so your value system says that lying is a bad thing. You shouldn't lie. It's not good. You don't want to be that. Well, if you live in an area where it's illegal for you to participate in using marijuana or weed, whatever you want to call it, you're going to have to lie to somebody, are you not? You can't just be open and honest about doing something that is frowned upon and is illegal. So the cost of entry then is to lie. So technically speaking, you just went against your own value system, but you're going to convince yourself because it's something you want, you're going to justify it, right? And so that's the same thing that we're talking about here, but in a connectivity issue. Is if you've convinced yourself that you want to or you like being rude or being nasty or being non-connected to people around you, then it's going to be very hard for you to facilitate some of these changes that we're talking about, right? And so that's why I would encourage you to take a step back and say, are you really benefiting? Is this really the life that you're wanting? Are you proud of all your behaviors? Is it getting you the results? Your best thinking got you here, kind of a thing. Like, how's that working for you? All these little phrases. It's true. Right? Like, if you're if you're constantly, dealing with disrespect and people are always pissing you off and you're just in these constant, debate matches and fights and things of that nature, ask yourself, like, is this really what I want? I mean, is this the life? So, because what you're going to find out is your decision making and the way you're approaching things is giving you that result. And so if you don't like the result, then you might need to change, how you're going about it. And I think that is a huge obstacle for a lot of us to overcome, because, we're constantly bombarded with so much media and movies and everything else that tells us to portray a certain kind of image. And we're oftentimes, we're given accolades, by being an asshole to somebody in return, right? Or if somebody makes a simple mistake, we drop the hammer on that, and then everybody's congratulating you because you did a good thing by dropping a hammer on some poor schmuck who made a bad choice. And so we're constantly being told that that's the way you go about it, right? Like, the hammer, a fist. And that's just not true. Right? We want love and compassion when it happens to us, but yet we're not really interested in giving it out, right? And so that's part of the connectivity, is being honest with yourself and saying, look, is this really the life that I want? Am I really getting the results? If not, then maybe I should look into and changing some of my behavior patterns. And that's when you'll start to realize, wow, I get a completely different response when I change the way I respond to things. And this whole time I thought that I liked being that person. No, I didn't like it. I just got comfortable with being that person, and it felt so comfortable to me that it became a reaction that I didn't even have to think about anymore. So I just assumed that was me, and I just assumed I liked it. When in all reality, you didn't like it, because you're constantly getting in fights and everything else because of that behavior. So if you change it and become a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more open, a little bit more connected, you'll start to notice that maybe some of those fights start to dissipate. A different caliber of human being comes into your orbit, because now you're attracting something different, because you're putting something out there that's different. And you'll look back, 5-10 years later, and be like, wow, I can't believe I'm where I'm at. And him and I both, I think, can relate to that right now. Because if you would have told me 10, 20 years ago this was the life that I was going to have, there's no way in hell I would have wanted it. And I never thought I would have enjoyed it the way I enjoy it. But the reason why I do is I had to step back and realize all my mindset that I was having was giving me a certain outcome that I thought that I liked. But if I was honest to myself, I didn't really like it that much. I just got used to it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, everything you said is I agree 100%. It's that, you become accustomed to your surroundings. Learned helplessness is a real deal, right? We've learned that in psychology, right? Learned helplessness is a real deal. You can take all the walls down, and that rat still thinks that they're in an enclosed spot, and they just don't leave. They just sit there and they just they cower and they die. Well, guess what? That means in human form, we do the same thing. We have learned failure, and not the good kind of I'm going to learn from the failure. I'm talking about the I'm a failure kind of attitude failure. You carry the attitude of a failure rather than the attitude of a student.
Yep.
We're forever students, and it's very difficult to learn how to be a good student. I think that's really the key. I had to learn how to be a good student. I sucked as a student. I thought I had all the answers when I was in school. I thought that my behavior was always warranted in school, so I had to learn how to study. I had to learn how to be a student. And those two things, I think, are vital. I think that if you create routines in the morning that prepare you well, and you create routines in the evening that resolve things well, I think you'll perform better in between.
Right.
And I think however you do that, I don't care how you do that. I don't care whether you use religion to do that. I don't care if you use faith or philosophy to do that. I don't care if you use 12-step programs to do that. I don't care if you use therapy to do that. I don't care what you use to do that. But by bookending your day in some shape or fashion, you will do much better in between that day. But when you leave it open-ended and you just carry on for long periods of time without self-reflection, without cleaning house, without taking some inventory of what's happening to you and how the world is going, you might find yourself very off the path that you thought you were on, because we don't get off the path, in one day. It's a very slow progression of walking. Next thing you know, you look around and you're like, wait a minute, I'm lost. Yeah. Yeah, you're lost. And let me tell you something. When you're 30, it's harder to get back to found. When you're 40, it's harder to get back to found. When you're 50, it's even harder. And when you're 60, it's even harder. Yeah. And so as you get older, it's not going to get easier. So the moment is now. Now does matter more, no matter what you're talking about. The moment to look around and say, man, am I where I want to be? Am I going in the direction that I want to be? Am I doing the things that I feel comfortable with? That if this path continues to go the exact same way, that I feel this life was worth living. this life was valid. Because I don't care what, whatever.
I heard that one.
Whatever negative that you said, like, when you say people suck, the world sucks.
Yeah.
Here's the answer to that. The opposite is also true.
Yeah.
That's always the answer. I don't care what negative comment you say. I will tell you the opposite is also true.
Yeah. He seems happy.
The dog,
like he's prancing.
It's also quiet.
It sounds like he's prancing
he's
or
just
something.
Walking around. He woke up and now he's just walking around the dang floor. But the opposite is always true. So regardless of how you're feeling, it's always short-lived. It doesn't stay. Nothing stays at a certain intensity level.
Everything's impermanent.
Things that really bother you the most feel real intense, but think of all your entire lifetime. Like, you may want to put all those intense things together and call it like it's always been that way. My life has always been. No. You've had a lot of moments in between where you laughed and you enjoyed and you whatever. You've had those moments. You may not want to focus on those moments. You may not want to give credit to those moments. They may feel like they're so far away from each other. But the reality of this world is that things are balanced. When you're off balance, you just got to figure out a way to get back on balance, because the balance exists. There's just as many negative integers as there are positive integers. You can't change the science of that. You just can't. No matter how much you try to focus on all the negative integers, those positive integers are still over there, and they're still just as attainable as the negative numbers. So that's the beauty of believing in the realities of math and science as a philosophy. Right. It's just knowing that somewhere down the road, I just need to come back to zero. I'm good right there at zero, man. I don't need to be living a 10 kind of life. If I'm just here at zero, I will be content. I like to get that 5 because that's where I feel really good. But I don't, I know those negative numbers don't last very long.
Yeah, that was one of the things I got my kids finally to understand. I used to ask them, like, I always ask them when I pick them up from school, how was your day? What did you learn? And when I would ask them how their day was, if something recently just happened that was bad or something they didn't really like, they would say, oh, I had a bad day. And I was correct. I was like, really? Your whole day was bad? Or was it just that little moment? And then now I got them, like the other day I picked him up. It was my son. I was like, hey, buddy, how was your day? He was like, well, bad. Well, it wasn't bad. It was a good day, but it was one bad moment. I was like, oh, okay. What was it? And so it was cool to kind of see them, and it's reflective on their whole outlook on other things as well. So it's like, actually, it is important. But before we start to wrap up, let me read some of these comments. Everybody, I am paying attention to just, they're going by so fast sometimes. Richard said, and there it is, a victimhood mentality will always be the enemy of personal progress. I agree with that 100%. Margie said, exactly, I love that. Have positive energy, then it spreads. I've had bad days and it will show, but then I try to grab it and discard it quickly. Very cool. Richard said, you can blame as many people, places, or things as you want, but until you take accountability of the results of your own actions, you will never grow, mature, or succeed. Once again, I agree 100%, and apparently Margie did too, because she said boom. And then Marissa says, I feel like that's what all the problems we're having in society boil down to, projecting how we feel and acting out against someone because of it. And then Ellie said, thanks, guys. Stop provoking. Every mistake is a lesson learned. Agree. Margie followed her previous comment with life is a learning process every day. Do what you have to function in a positive way. It takes practice and discipline. Yes, it does. And then 2 more comments. Marissa said, I've been doing a lot of new things in my new morning and night routines. A lot of journaling, reflecting, gratitude, and intention/goal setting. That is awesome. And then she said, was it a bad day or was it a bad 5 minutes that you allowed to define your whole day? I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist. That's awesome, and I couldn't agree more. So you have any final thoughts that you want to put out there before we wrap things up?
No, that it's the connections are always worthy. I don't care, like today we were talking about connectivity. Connections are always worth it. You may have had some bad connections or some connections that maybe they didn't go the way you wanted them to go. But I bet you even in a lot of those negative connections, there were still some good moments. And you can still feel grateful for having embraced those moments the way you did. And then on to the next. But resolving the negative from one relationship allows you to not carry it on to the next, and I think that's probably the most important thing, because you know what, I don't want to pay the price for someone else that hurt you, even though I know naturally that's just the way it is. I may remind you of a brother. Maybe remind you of an uncle. I might remind you of an enemy. I don't know. And I have to understand that happens to every human that's going to interact with me. I'm probably reminding them of somebody, because that's the Rolodex of emotions that we kind of play with. That's how we are. Um, so I have to be respectful and understand that. And at the same time, I will have to learn how to be more respectful and allow you to show me who you're wanting me to see about you, instead of me constantly judging you in regards to who I think you are. Respecting other people and letting them show you who they are, and believe them in the moment. It doesn't hurt you to believe them in the moment. It really doesn't. Believing somebody and trusting in somebody to the point where it's going to hurt you painfully is two different things. But continue to connect with others, because that's where the magic is. Connectivity.
Right, yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. Before I give my final thoughts, just once again, thank you everybody for tuning in today. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, like, things of that nature, share it with others. Trying to get our numbers back up and let people know we're back on the scene. And as always, you can follow us on social media. He is at the Dope Doctor. I am at the Dharma Guy. And if you guys have a specific topic or show you'd like to hear about, by all means, reach out to us and let us know, and we will do our best to cover it. I have a couple tips here to get back into the flow of things. First tip I have is a statement, and that is connectivity is really important, and it's kind of what drives us. That's what gives us our fulfillment. In order for that to happen, the first thing I would say is vulnerable. Vulnerability is important. You have to be vulnerable, and you have to respect other people's vulnerabilities. Without that, connectivity really isn't going to happen. Without being vulnerable and acknowledging that in other people, you kind of put this invisible barrier that nobody can get through. The second thing I would say about connectivity is be mindful of your own actions. I said it earlier, and that is, be aware of what the feeling tone is of what you just did. What were you reacting to? What were you responding to? Was it the action, or was it whatever feeling or emotion that action brought up in you? And was it warranted? Did it deserve that? And then the third and final one is a very simple one, and that is just remember to be kind. Think, and I'm stealing this one from Louis, and that is, before you respond to somebody, think in your head, I want to be kind. Make sure you're coming from a place of kindness, not a place of anger and aggression and all these other emotions that we're used to having. Make sure you come from a place of kindness, and you very rarely will be wrong. So, anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and now that you know better, do better. Peace. Are you still here? What are you doing? I told you, go do better.